Close your eyes for a moment and let the modern world fade away. The hum of traffic, the glow of screens, the sharp, sterile scent of clean air and sanitized spaces, all of it dissolves like morning mist. In its place, something older stirs. Something warmer, something that smells of wood smoke and rain-soaked earth, bread and leather and the living breath of animals sheltering from the cold. Tonight, we're traveling backward through time, not with dates or battles or the grand sweep of history, but with something far more intimate, something you've never truly experienced, yet might recognize in the oldest corners of your memory. We're going to explore what the medieval world smelled like. Imagine yourself standing at the edge of a small town as dusk settles over the countryside. The year doesn't matter, it could be 1350 or 1420, or any century when the roads were made of mud and stone, when candles were precious, when the night was something to be survived rather than conquered with electric light. You've been walking all day. Your feet ache. Your cloak is heavy with the dampness of an afternoon rain that finally stopped an hour ago, leaving the world glistening and subdued. The leather of your boots is stiff and cold, and the wool against your skin has that particular earthy smell that only comes from fabric that's never been fully dry. It's never been truly clean by modern standards. But is yours broken in, lived in, real? The cobblestones beneath your feet glisten with reflected light. Somewhere ahead, you can see the warm amber glow of lanterns, the telltale flicker of firelight through shuttered windows. And there, yes, there it is, the scent of wood smoke, drifting lazy and thick on the evening air. This is not the acrid chemical smell of industrial smoke, but something older, something that speaks of oak and beech, of pine and birch, each wood burning with its own character, its own voice, in the language of scent. It carries with it the promise of warmth, of shelter, of rest after a long and weary road. You're heading toward an inn in the medieval world. Inns were not merely places to sleep, they were portals. Thresholds between the wilderness and civilization, between the danger of the road and the fragile safety of walls and locks. Where democratic spaces were merchant and peasant. Pilgrim and thief might share a bench, a cup of ale, a corner of straw to sleep upon. They smelled of everything, of everyone who passed through, of every meal cooked, every fire lit, every animal stabled, every secret whispered in the dark. Tonight, we're going to step inside one of these places. We're going to breathe its air, trace the invisible map of its smells, and understand what it meant to exist in a world where scent was not merely background, but information, a language read with every breath, telling stories of class and trade, health and danger, memory and desire. So take a deep breath now, here in your own time, your own space. Let your shoulders drop. Let your breathing slow. Feel the weight of your body supported, safe, grounded in the present, even as your mind begins to drift backward through the centuries. The road awaits. The inn is just ahead, its windows glowing like promises in the gathering dark, and with each step closer, smells grow richer, more complex, more real until the past is not something you're reading about or imagining, but something you're living, breath by breath, scent by scent, heartbeat by heartbeat. The door is just ahead. Can you smell the smoke? The ale. The bread. Let's go inside. The road behind you has been long. You started before dawn, when the world was still wrapped in that particular silence that comes just before birds begin their morning songs. The dew was heavy then, soaking through the hem of your cloak as you walked through fields that separated one village from the next. The air smelled clean in that pre-dawn hour of grass and soil, of the faint green perfume of growing things, of water held in cupped leaves and spider webs. But that was ours ago, different world ago. As the sun climbed, the smells changed. The road itself began to assert its presence, churned mud from yesterday's rain and this morning's carts. The sharp mineral scent of wet stone and something else, something organic and unavoidable, the layered evidence of every traveler who'd passed this way. Horse manure, some fresh, some days old and dried to dusty clumps, the sour trace of human waste where someone had stepped off the road. The ghost of smoke from a fire someone had built in the night and left to die. You passed through a forest, where the smell of pine resin was so strong it made your eyes water, where mushrooms and rot and the deep black scent of leaf mold spoke of things breaking down, turning to earth, feeding the endless cycle. You heard but didn't see a deer crashing through underbrush. And for just a moment, you caught the wild musk of its passing at midday. You rested in a field and ate the bread and hard cheese you'd been carrying. The bread had absorbed the smells of your journey, leather from your pack, the wool of your cloak, or a faint trace of smoke from the last inn you'd stayed at 3 nights ago. Food in the medieval world always carried these ghost smells, these memories of where it had been, how it had been stored, whose hands had touched it. The cheese was sharp and slightly bitter, made from sheep's milk and aged in cloth that gave it a subtle earthiness. You drank water from a stream, and it tasted of stone and distance, of places upstream you'd never see, of rain that fell weeks ago and hills you could barely make out on the horizon, and then you walked again. Your body has its own smell now. It's after a day on the road. Sweat, yes, but not the sharp chemical sweat of modern exertion. This is the sweat of wool that doesn't breathe the way synthetic fabrics do, of a body that bathed perhaps a week ago in cold water with no soap, that works and moves and lives in its skin without the constant warfare of modern hygiene. It's not unpleasant, really just human. It's mixed with wood smoke and leather and the dust of the road. The afternoon brought another brief rain. You smelled it coming minutes before the first drops fell, that electric, almost metallic scent of ozone, the way the air changes pressure and temperature, the earth seeming to breathe in anticipation. When it came, it was cold and clean, washing some of the dust from your face, soaking through the shoulders of your cloak, making the leather of your pack darken and smell even more strongly of tannin and oil. The rain brought out other smells too. The earth released its secrets, minerals, and roots. The hidden life of worms and beetles, the rot of last autumn's leaves finally surrendering to spring. Wet wool acquired that distinctive animal smell, reminding you that these fibers once grew on living sheep, that your clothing is not manufactured but grown, harvested, transformed by human hands from one kind of life into another. Now, as evening settles and you approach the outskirts of town, you can feel your body's weariness. Your feet have that particular ache that comes from hours of walking in boots that were never quite designed for comfort. Your shoulders are stiff from the weight of your pack. Your eyes feel dry and tired from watching the road, from scanning for danger, from the simple vigilance that travel requires when there are no maps on phones, no GPS tracking your progress, no emergency services a call away. But ahead, yes, ahead there is light. There is the promise of rest. The smell of smoke is stronger now, mixed with other scents that speak of human habitation. A bread baking somewhere, the sour-sweet smell of brewing ale. Manure from stables is the indefinable scent of many people living. Close together, their fires and cooking, and animals and waste, creating a complex atmosphere that is neither pleasant nor unpleasant, but simply real, the smell of life itself, unfiltered and immediate. Your pace quickens slightly despite your fatigue. The inn is close now. We can almost taste the ale, almost feel the warmth of the fire on your face. Just a little further, just around this corner, past this row of timber-framed houses, with their upper stories jutting out over the narrow street, past the smell of someone's evening stew and the sharp temps of urine from a chamber pot emptied too close to the road. And there it is, the sign creaking in the evening breeze, the windows glowing like eyes in the gathering dark. The door, solid oak, banded with iron, promising shelter and warmth, and the end of this long day. Your hand reaches for the latch. What lies beyond it will embrace you with scents you've never known, yet somehow mysteriously remember. The sign hangs from an iron bracket, moving in the gentle evening wind with a rhythmic creak that has worn a groove in the metal over decades, perhaps centuries of swaying. In the failing light, you can just make out the painted image, a white hart, its antlers spreading like winter branches. It's faded but still visible against a background that might once have been red, or perhaps dark blue. It's impossible to tell now. The building itself seems to lean slightly, as if weary from standing in this spot for so many years. Timber framing, dark with age and smoke and weather, divides whitewashed plaster walls that were probably bright once, but have settled into a warm off-white cream stained with watermarks and the shadows of passing seasons. The thatch roof is thick and well-maintained. This is a prosperous establishment, you can tell. The straw is golden, even in the dimming light, and at the edges where it overhangs the walls. Small birds have made their homes, their chirping now falling silent as night approaches. There are 3 windows on the ground floor, each with shutters pulled back to let the light spill out. The glass, and yes, there is glass, though it's thick and uneven, filled with bubbles and imperfections that make the firelight beyond seem to ripple and dance. Glows with a warmth that seems almost alive. One window is slightly open, and through it comes the murmur of voices. A sudden burst of laughter, and the sharp, yeasty smell of ale. You pause for a moment with your hand on the iron latch, which is cold and smooth from thousands upon thousands of hands that have grasped it just as you do now. Your fingers find the worn spots, the places where human touch has polished the metal to a dull shine. Take this moment. Notice how your heartbeat slows in anticipation. Notice how your breathing deepens, preparing for the wave of warm air and scent that will hit you when the door opens. Notice how the sounds from inside seem both inviting and slightly overwhelming after a day of relative solitude on the road. The latch lifts with a solid clunk. The door swings inward. It's heavier than you expected, and you have to push with your shoulder. The hinges, despite being well-oiled, emit a low groan that announces your arrival, more effectively than any knock, and then it hits you. The smell, it's not one smell but dozens, perhaps hundreds, all layered and intertwined, creating an olfactory tapestry so complex that your modern brain, trained to seek out singular scents in a world of air fresheners and cleaning products, struggles for a moment to process it all. First and foremost, wood smoke. It dominates everything, a thick rolling presence that immediately makes your eyes water slightly if you're not used to it. This is not the gentle waft you smelled from outside, but the full reality of an interior space heated by open fires with chimneys that don't quite draw properly, that haven't been properly cleaned in weeks or months, that send as much smoke into the room as up the flue. It's a living presence. This smoke hue can see it hazing the air, catching the light, moving in slow currents as people shift and doors open and close. Beneath the smoke, or perhaps woven through it, comes the smell of ale. Sour, yeasty, slightly fermented, not quite vinegar, but heading in that direction. It's spilled on the floor, soaked into the rushes that cover the packed earth, splashed on tables and benches, dried on clothing and beards. Medieval ale is not like modern beer. It's thicker, less carbonated, often murky with yeast and sediment, and its smell is correspondingly more pungent, more alive with bacterial action than bodies. Human bodies that don't bathe often, that wear wool and leather, that absorb and hold sweat, that work physically in the fields and on the roads, that live in close proximity with animals and dirt and smoke. It's not quite the sharp smell of modern body odor. There's no deodorant to mask or fail to mask the scent, no synthetic fabrics to trap and concentrate it. Instead, it's a more organic smell, mixed with wool, lanolin, and wood smoke. With the dust of the road and the oil of leather, some bodies smell more strongly than others. The man at the bar, clearly a laborer, carries the earthy scent of manure and honest sweat. The woman serving ale has the yeasty smell of the kitchen clinging to her, along with onions and smoke. There's food cooking somewhere in the back, meat roasting. You can smell it clearly now. Pork or mutton, the fat sizzling and smoking as it drips into the fire. Onions frying in that fat, their sweet pungency cutting through the other smells. Bread baking in a side oven, its warm weedy aroma promising comfort. Herbs, rosemary, you think, and perhaps sage hung in bunches from the beams overhead. Their oils slowly releasing into the warm air. Animal smells drift in from somewhere, probably a stable attached to the building or very nearby. Horse and oxen, their manure, and the hay they eat, the leather of their tack. And dogs, there are definitely dogs here. You can hear them before you see them, a whine and the click of claws on the floor. And then one emerges from under a table, sniffing at your boots with wet enthusiasm, carrying its own complex smell of wet fur and whatever it's been eating and rolling in. The floor rushes add their own note to the symphony. They're meant to be refreshed regularly, but in practice they often sit for weeks, collecting spilled ale and dropped food, soaking up moisture from wet boots and muddy hems. They smell of herbs, someone has tried to freshen them. With lavender or chamomile, but beneath that sweetness is the sour scent of decay, of organic matter breaking down. Tallow candles burn on some of the tables, adding their fatty, slightly rancid smell to the air. These are not the pure beeswax candles the wealthy might burn, but cheap candles made from rendered animal fat, and they smell accordingly a greasy, meaty scent that adds to the general atmosphere of organic life. And beneath everything, or perhaps holding everything together, is the smell of the building itself. Old wood, centuries old in some of these beams, smoke, cured and dried, carrying its own history. Lime plaster, damp stone in the corners where water seeps in, the earthen floor, packed hard by countless feet but still releasing its mineral smell when disturbed. Your eyes adjust to the dim interior. The common room is perhaps 30 feet square, with a massive fireplace dominating one wall. The fire blazes high, filling the hearth with dancing flames that send shadows leaping across the walls. Tables and benches fill the space, most of them occupied. You count perhaps 20 people, though it's hard to tell in the dim flickering light. Some turn to look at new arrivals, are always of interest, but most are absorbed in their own concerns. Conversations continue, dice rattle on a table in the corner. Someone laughs at a joke you didn't hear. The door closes behind you with a solid thud, shutting out the clean evening air and sealing you into this world of warmth and smoke and humanity. A woman approaches, wiping her hands on a stained apron. Her face is reddened by the heat of the kitchen, and she smells of bread and sweat and wood smoke. "A bed?" she asks, her voice practical and neither friendly nor unfriendly. "Ale." You nod, and she gestures toward a table near the fire. "Welcome to the medieval inn." This is what it really smelled like, not the romantic notion of old England from costume dramas, but the lived reality of human beings, finding warmth and shelter and community in a world without modern sanitation or chemistry or shame about the honest smells of life. Breathe it in. Let it become real. Your journey into the past has truly begun. You make your way to the bench, she indicated. Threading between tables and bodies, your boots crunching on the rushes underfoot. As you move through the room, the scents shift and change near this table. The sharp smell of unwashed male bodies and wet dog. Near that one, the sweeter scent of someone who's been carrying herbs or perhaps works in a garden. At one table, 2 men are eating from wooden bowls, and the rich smell of stew meat and root vegetables and barley rises with the steam. The bench is rough-hewn wood, worn smooth by countless bodies but still splintery in places. You shed your pack with a grunt of relief, feeling your shoulders suddenly light, feeling the places where the straps have been digging in. Your cloak is damp and heavy, and you drape it over the back of the bench, where the heat from the fire might start to dry it. Knowing that it will take hours, knowing that you'll probably put it back on tomorrow still slightly damp, adding another layer to its complex aroma of wool and travel and wood smoke. The fire draws your attention. It's magnificent, a roaring blaze of oak logs, each as thick as your thigh, stacked with the expertise of someone who knows how to bank a fire for hours of steady heat. The flames leap and curl, blue at the base where they're hottest, yellow and orange higher up, occasionally showing green where minerals in the wood catch and burn. The heat is intense, almost painful on your face after the cool of the evening, but your body craves it, leans into it. The smell of the fire is cleaner here than in the rest of the room for a moment. You get pure wood smoke, the honest scent of oak burning. Releasing the sunlight, it's stored decade after decade as it grew. But then the wind shifts slightly, or someone disturbs the fire, and you get a face full of the darker smoke. The stuff that speaks of incomplete combustion and creosote. That carries particles of char and ash. The woman returns with a wooden cup and a clay jug. She pours without ceremony, the liquid glugging out thick and murky. The smell rises immediately, the sour-sweet fermentation of ale that's been brewed perhaps a week ago. That's had time to develop character, but not time to go completely off. There are bits floating in it, sediment and yeast, and when you raise it to your lips and drink, it's lukewarm and slightly slimy and profoundly real in a way that no modern beer could ever be. It tastes of grain barley, You think and water and the wild yeasts that settled into it from the air? It's not particularly alcoholic by modern standards, but it's safe in a way that water often isn't. The brewing process having killed most of the bacteria that might cause illness, you drink and the liquid is filling, almost a food in itself. And within minutes you can feel a slight pleasant warmth spreading through your limbs around you. The life of the inn continues. At the table to your left, 3 merchants are deep in conversation, heads bent together, voices low. One of them smells of spices. You catch whiffs of cinnamon and pepper and something else you can't identify. Exotic and mysterious. His clothes are finer than the others. Wool that's been fulled and dyed a deep blue, and he wears leather gloves even indoors. He's been traveling from somewhere far away. You realize his smell carries information about cities you've never seen. Markets where goods from the east arrive by ship. The privileges of wealth and trade. The man next to him, in contrast, smells of fish. Not fresh fish, but the lingering ghost of fish handled day after day. There's no washing away that smell once it's seeped into your skin and clothing. He's probably a fishmonger, or deals with preserved fish herring, perhaps, or cod, the valuable protein that keeps people alive through winters when fresh food is impossible. The third merchant smells primarily of leather, not tanned leather like your boots, but the sharper smell of leather in process, mixed with the oak bark used in tanning. His hands are stained dark, and there's a chemical smell to him. Something acrid that speaks of lye and urine. The substances used to process hides from bloody animal skins into usable material at the table across from you. A family huddles together, mother, father, 3 children ranging from perhaps 5 to 12 years old. They smell as a unit, a family smell of shared spaces and communal living. The children smell of milk and bread and the particular sweetness of young bodies not yet trained to adult labor. The mother smells of kitchen work yeast in her hair, smoke in her clothes, the lingering scent of the cheese she probably makes. The father is harder to read. He has the general smell of outdoor work, but nothing specific. Perhaps a day laborer, a man who works wherever there's work, who doesn't have a single trade to mark him with its particular scent. They're eating bread and cheese, tearing the bread into chunks and sharing from a single portion of cheese wrapped in cloth. The bread smells wonderful, dark and hearty, made from mixed grains rather than pure wheat, with a sour note that speaks of sourdough starter, of the same yeast culture kept alive for years, fed and nurtured and used again and again. The cheese is white and crumbly, probably made from goat's milk, sharp and slightly tangy. Near the fire, an old man sits alone, his hands wrapped around a cup, staring into the flames. He smells of age and tobacco. Yes, tobacco. Even though it's expensive and relatively rare, he has it. And the smoke from his pipe adds a different note to the room's atmosphere, sweetish and aromatic. His clothes are patched but clean, and there's a dignity to him despite his obvious poverty. His smell is less strong than some of the others. He's reached an age where he moves less, sweats less, perhaps even eats less. He's becoming lighter, you sense. Already half faded from the world, the dogs there are 3 that you can see now, move through the room with the confidence of ownership. They're working dogs probably, or were once. Hunting hounds gone old, perhaps, or guard dogs, or just the inevitable canine presence that attaches itself to any place where there's food and warmth. They smell as dogs have always smelled, of wet fur and the carnivorous breath of metators. Of the mud they've rolled in and the things they've sniffed. One comes to investigate you, its nose cold and wet against your hand, and you smell its breath, old meat and decay. The scent of teeth that have never been brushed, of a mouth full of biological activity. You scratch behind its ears anyway, and it leans into your hand with a happiness that transcends the centuries. From the kitchen comes a sudden burst of sound. Something dropped. Kerr's laughter. The smell of cooking intensifies for a moment as a door opens and closes. You catch a clearer whiff of the roasting meat, and your stomach clenches with hunger. How long has it been since you ate? The bread and cheese at midday? But that was hours ago. And your body has burned those calories walking. Always walking. The serving woman appears again. this time carrying a wooden bowl and a spoon. She sets it before you without ceremony. This is what's available. Take it or go hungry. The bowl is warm in your hands, and the smell rises rich and complex. Mutton stew with onions, turnips, and barley. A bay leaf floats on top, and there's the ghost of garlic, precious and rare. The broth is thick with fat, and when you taste it, it's salty and savory and profound in its simplicity. You eat slowly, letting the warmth spread through you. The mutton is tough. This was an old sheep, worked for its wool for years before being slaughtered, but the long cooking has made it tender enough. The turnips have absorbed the meat flavor and turned sweet and soft. The barley is chewy and filling, sticking to your ribs in the way that simple carbohydrates do when your body is genuinely hungry, genuinely in need of fuel around you. The conversations continue. Someone is telling a story. You catch fragments about a journey, a narrow escape from bandits, the kindness of strangers. Someone else is complaining about taxes, about the harvest, about the weather. Eternal complaints. You realize human concerns that haven't changed in centuries and won't change for centuries more. The fire pops and sends a shower of sparks onto the hearthstone. Someone laughs. A child yawns enormously. The dogs settle near the fire, their work of begging completed. Now content to sleep, the smoke swirls in the rafters. And you notice for the first time the hams hanging up there, suspended in the smoke to cure. They've been there for weeks, perhaps months, slowly drying and taking on the preservative qualities of the smoke, their fat dripping occasionally into the fire with a hiss and a burst of savory smell. There are sausages too, strung like beads and bunches of herbs, and what might be a wreath of garlic. This room is everything kitchen, dining hall, social center, and on the coldest nights, even bedroom for those who can't afford a private space upstairs. It smells of all these functions, of all the people who've passed through, of all the meals cooked and eaten, all the stories told, all the griefs and joys and simple human presence compressed into these walls. Your eyes grow heavy in the warmth. The ale has done its work, and the food has done its work, and your body, having been tense and vigilant all day on the road, finally begins to release that tension. Your shoulders drop. Your breathing deepens. But before sleep, there's more to sense. It's more to understand about this place and how people lived. The night has barely begun, and the inn has many secrets yet to reveal. In the medieval world, scent was not merely sensation, it was information. As vital and readable as words on a page to those who had learned its grammar. Sit here for a moment, warm and fed, and let your modern assumptions about smell fade away. We've been trained to view smell as the least important of the senses, something to be controlled and suppressed, something slightly embarrassing or primitive. We spray and scrub and sanitize, creating a world of neutral non-scent, punctuated only by the deliberately added fragrances of products designed to smell like fresh linen, or mountain spring concepts that have no actual smell. But here, in this medieval inn, scent is a primary text that everyone can read. The merchant at the next table smells of spices, and everyone in the room knows immediately what this means about his trade, his travels, his relative wealth. Spices are expensive, arriving from distant lands through a complex network of traders and middlemen. A man who smells of cinnamon and pepper has been to ports, has access to goods that most people will never see, commands resources that elevate him above the common run of humanity. His smell is his credential. More reliable than any document or seal, the fishmonger's smell marks his trade just as clearly, but places him lower in the social hierarchy. Yes, he provides necessary protein, but his is a smelly trade, one that marks you with its scent, no matter how much you wash. In a world where water is precious and washing is labor-intensive, the smells of your trade become part of your identity, as visible to the nose as the color of your hair is to the eye. The leatherworker carries the acrid smell of tannins and urine substances used to process hides, and this marks him as someone who works with his hands, who deals with the messy transformation of death into usable material. There's a hierarchy even among craftsmen, and tanners and leatherworkers occupy the lower rungs, their necessary work considered base despite its skill. largely because of the smells involved. But scent spoke not only of trade and class, but of geography and journey. That traveler by the door, the one who just arrived ahead of you, the mud on his boots carries the mineral signature of roads you recognize he's come from the north, where the soil has more clay, where the roads hold water longer after rain. The woman in the corner has the faint salt smell of someone who lives near the sits, worked into her clothing, her hair, her very pores after years of breathing maritime air. Scent also revealed health. An illness in ways that doctors studied and common people understood intuitively, the sweet smell of certain fevers, the sour smell of digestive troubles, the peculiar metallic scent of blood. All of these were diagnostics in an age before modern medicine, before blood tests and imaging. A wise healer could smell illness before other symptoms became obvious. Mothers could smell when their children were sickening. Death itself had a smell, sweetish decay that signaled the body's final surrender. And then there were the deliberate uses of scent. The ways people tried to communicate or attract or repel through smell, the wealthy carried pomanders, hollow balls of silver or gold filled with ambergris or musk, with cloves and cinnamon hanging from chains around their necks or attached to belts. These served multiple purposes. They were portable prestige symbols, demonstrating wealth and access to exotic materials. They were also believed to ward off disease, which was thought to travel through miasma, bad air that could be counteracted by good smells. And yes, they made you smell pleasant, or at least different from the common run of humanity. Women tucked herbs into their bodices, lavender, rosemary, rose petals. Men wore leather that had been scented with oils. These were not frivolous vanities, but part of the complex social language of scent, ways of signaling that you cared about such things, that you had resources to spend on non-essentials, that you understood the codes of courtship and attraction. But most people smelled like their lives, like work and wool and wood smoke, like the animals they kept and the earth they worked, like their families and their homes. This was not shameful. This was simply real. In this inn right now, you could close your eyes and know approximately how many people are in the room just from the scent of human bodies. You could estimate the ratio of men to women. Women's scent is generally lighter. Mixed with the yeast and bread of kitchen work, you could tell how long it's been since the rushes were changed. The sour note is growing stronger as the evening progresses and more ale gets spilled. You could even, if you paid attention, smell the subtle shifts in the room's emotional state. Fear has a smell, the sharp tense of adrenaline-charged sweat. So does arousal, anger, contentment. These are real chemical changes, pheromones and stress hormones, that humans can actually detect. Even if we don't consciously register what we're smelling, the medieval world understood this in ways we've forgotten. They lived closer to their bodies, closer to the bodies of others, in a proximity that modern people would find claustrophobic. Privacy was rare. Space was shared. And so the language of scent became refined through constant use, a form of communication as natural as speech. When a stranger entered a room, you smelled them before you saw their face clearly in the dim candlelight. Their scent told you where they'd been, what they'd eaten, whether they'd been traveling hard or taking their leisure, whether they were sick or healthy, fearful or confident. The air itself was a medium of exchange, carrying information from body to body, from fire to nose, from kitchen to common room, from stable to sleeping chamber. Even memory was encoded in scent more powerfully than in images or words. The smell of wood smoke would forever mean home to a child raised in a cottage with a hearth. The smell of horses meant travel, freedom, or labor, depending on your relationship with them. The smell of baking bread was comfort made tangible, a promise that there would be food, that you would not go hungry, at least not today. And loss too was preserved in scent. The particular smell of a mother's hair, a father's leather jerkin, a lover's skin, these could ambush you years later, triggered by some random combination of scents. And suddenly, the dead were present again, vivid and real as they had been in life. Summoned not by memory, but by the chemical reality of smell. So as you sit here in this inn, Understand that what you're breathing is not merely air with particles in it. You're breathing story, history, humanity in its most concentrated form. Every breath is an act of reading, of absorbing information that your conscious mind may not fully process, but that your deeper self understands completely. The medieval world was a world experienced through all senses, but perhaps none so constantly and unconsciously as smell. And now, having learned to read this language, let's follow our noses deeper into the inn, to where the smells grow richer still. There's a door at the back of the common room, half hidden behind a wooden partition, and through it comes a heat and a smell so powerful, so rich, so layered with complexity that it almost feels like a solid thing you could touch. This is the kitchen, the burning heart of the inn, the source of all those tantalizing smells that have been teasing your nose since you entered. The door opens as the serving woman pushes through, carrying an empty tray. And for just a moment, you get the full blast of kitchen air, superheated, smoke-filled, dense with the smells of cooking and preservation and fermentation and all the alchemical processes that transform raw ingredients into food. Let's follow her. Let's step through that door and immerse ourselves in the most aromatic space in the entire medieval world. The kitchen is surprisingly large, nearly as big as the common room, but it feels smaller because of the massive hearth that dominates the entire back wall. This is not a fireplace, but a cooking fire. 6 feet wide and 4 feet deep, with multiple levels and hooks and chains, with a crane for swinging heavy pots, with a whole architecture of iron designed to let you cook multiple dishes simultaneously. Over different heat levels, the fire itself is a landscape of coals and flames. Oak logs burn at the back, providing steady heat. Smaller pieces of beech and ash are arranged at the sides, burning hotter for searing meat. At the very front, banked coals glow red orange, perfect for keeping things warm without cooking them further. The entire system is the result of centuries of trial and error, refined to the point where an experienced cook can manage 4 or 5 dishes at once, each receiving exactly the heat it needs. The smell of wood smoke here is overwhelming at first. Your eyes water immediately if you're not used to it. There's no real chimney, just a smoke hood that captures perhaps half of what the fire produces and channels it up and out. The rest fills the kitchen, hanging in visible layers, stinging your throat, making you cough until your body adjusts. But once you acclimate, once your eyes stop watering and your throat stops protesting, you begin to smell the other things, the smells that make all this smoke worthwhile. Meat. Roasting meat. The primal, powerful smell of fat and protein transformed by fire. A haunch of mutton turns slowly on a spit. It's rotated by a system of chains and counterweights. The fat sizzles and drips into a shallow pan beneath, where it pools with the juices, already being used to baste the meat with a brush made of bundled herbs. Every time the fat drips and hits the pan, a little cloud of aromatic steam rises, meat smell, herb smell, the chemical magic of the Maillard reaction as amino acids and sugars break down and recombine into hundreds of new flavor compounds. The smell is not like modern roasted meat. This sheep has grazed on herbs and grass, has worked as a living animal for years. It's developing muscle that's flavorful and complex. The fat has that particular lanolin quality of sheep fat, slightly musky, deeply savory. The herbs used for basting, rosemary and thyme. You can smell them clearly nourish their oils as they brush across the hot meat, mingling with the fat, creating a smell that seems to bypass your nose entirely and speak directly to your stomach. Your very DNA triggering hunger so profound it feels like need. On the hearth itself, suspended over the coals, an enormous iron pot simmers with what must be tomorrow's stew. You can smell turnips and cabbage, onions and barley, and the rich dark smell of stock made from bones that have been simmering for hours, extracting every molecule of flavor and gelatin, creating a liquid that will be both food and medicine, nourishment and comfort to one side. Bread is baking in a beehive oven built into the wall. The smell of baking bread is one of humanity's oldest and most powerful scent memories. There's evidence that it triggers responses deep in our brains. connected to survival and safety and the promise of life itself. This bread smells of fermentation and wheat, of the wild yeasts that have been cultivated in sourdough starter, of the subtle sweetness that emerges when starches break down in heat. The oven's mouth glows red, and waves of heat shimmer in the air before it. The baker, a woman with her sleeves rolled up despite the temperature, her face running with sweat, chooses a long wooden peel to check the loaves, pulling one partially out to examine the crust. The smell intensifies as she does, and you can hear the bread crackling, its crust hardening, its interior transforming from raw dough into the miraculous architecture of gluten and air that makes bread bread. Hanging from the ceiling beams are herbs in every stage of drying. Rosemary and thyme, lavender and chamomile, mint and sage, their smells blend together into a general herbaceousness. But if you focus, you can pick out individual notes. The lavender is sweetest, with that almost soapy quality. The mint is sharp and cooling, even just from its smell. The sage has an earthy, almost musty quality that speaks of autumn and savory dishes. And there, the darkest corner, strings of onions and garlic hang from nails. The smell is not as strong as you'd expect. They're dry. Their papery skin's intact, but every time someone touches them or the air moves, a little ghost of their pungency escapes. Sharp and eye-watering and somehow comforting in its familiarity. On a wooden table that runs the length of one wall, the next meal is being prepared. A young girl, perhaps 12 or 30, is chopping cabbage with a knife so large it seems impossible that she can wield it safely. The cabbage releases its sulfurous smell as the cells are broken, a smell that's almost unpleasant in its rawness. But that, you know, will transform into something sweet and mild with cooking. Next to her, an older woman is working a pile of dough, her hands moving with the practiced rhythm of someone who's made bread 10,000 times. The dough smells yeasty and alive, because it is alive. The yeast cells consuming sugars and producing carbon dioxide and alcohol, creating the smell of fermentation that's just short of rot, that balance point where decomposition becomes transformation. In clay pots along the wall, various stages of fermentation are happening. Ale is brewing. It smells sharp and sour and yeasty. Cabbage is being turned into sauerkraut, the lactic acid bacteria creating that distinctive pickle smell. Milk is souring into cheese, the bacteria doing their work slowly, transforming liquid into solid, bland into flavorful. The floor here is stone rather than earth. Easier to clean and less likely to catch fire, but even stone absorbs smells over time. This floor smells of centuries of spills and scrubbing, of the lye soap they use to clean it, of the herbs they scatter to mask odors, of the essential reality of a space dedicated to feeding people year after year. Decade after decade, there are mice in the walls, you can hear them scratching, and occasionally see one dart across the floor in the shadows. This is simply accepted. There's no way to keep mice out of a building like this, where the walls are plaster over wattle, where there are gaps and cracks everywhere. The goal is not elimination, but management. Keep them from the stored grain. Set traps, accept the occasional loss. A barrel in the corner contains salted fish herring, probably. Every time someone opens it, a blast of salt and fish smell escapes, so powerful it makes your nose wrinkle. But this is valuable protein. Insurance against winter, against famine, against the failure of the hunting or the livestock. Another barrel contains flour ground from mixed grains. When the baker scoops from it, a fine dust rises, smelling of wheat and rye and oats. Of the fields where they grew, of the mill where they were ground. The smell is dry and powdery, but with that essential grain sweetness. Underneath, the kuka stout man with arms like hams and a face that's permanently reddened by heat moves through all of this with practiced efficiency. He tastes from the stew pot, adds a pinch of salt from a precious store. He checks the roast, pronounces it nearly done. He barks orders at the girl and the baker, who respond without looking up from their work. His smell is the smell of the kitchen. It's concentrated and personified smoke and sweat. Meat and bread, herbs and onions, all layered over the base scent of a man who works in brutal heat for hours every day. It's not an unpleasant smell. Really, it's honest, productive. The smell of skilled labor creating the sustenance that keeps everyone else alive. On a high shelf. Away from the mice, there are more precious things. A small jar of honey sealed with wax. A leather pouch of peppercorns, each one worth more than most people earn in a day. A twist of saffron threads, a luxury so extreme that they're used only for the wealthiest guests. These items have their own smells. The honey-like concentrated summer, the pepper sharp and sneezy, the saffron exotic and mysterious. The kitchen is loud pots clanging, the fire crackling. People talking and calling out to each other, but underneath the noise is a kind of purposeful harmony. Everyone knows their role. Everyone is working toward the same goal, keeping people fed, keeping the inn running, keeping life going, and the smells bind it all together. They tell you that food is being prepared, that care is being taken, that there's enough, at least for now. They promise satisfaction and comfort. They make the smoke-filled air bearable because what's being created in that smoke is so fundamentally good you could stay here in this kitchen, watching and smelling, feeling the heat, listening to the sounds for hours. It's hypnotic in its way, the oldest human activity, the preparation of food. Unchanged in its essentials since the discovery of fire, but there are other smells yet to discover. Other parts of the inn that speak their own fragrant truths. Come, let's step back into the common room, and then venture outside to where earth and animal meet. The back door of the inn opens onto a small courtyard. Enclosed on three sides by buildings, the inn itself, the stable, what looks like a storage shed or perhaps living quarters for servants. The fourth side is a wooden fence, and beyond it, darkness and the sounds of the town settling in tonight. The air here is immediately different, cooler, cleaner, though clean is a relative term. You've stepped out of the smoke and body heat of the inn into the evening air, and your lungs expand gratefully, pulling in deep breaths of something that doesn't make your eyes water. But this air has its own powerful character, its own story to tell through scent. First, and most obvious, the stables. The smell of horses is immediate and unmistakable. That warm, herbivorous mammal smell of large animals mixed with hay and leather and manure. It's a smell that city dwellers rarely encounter in the modern world. But that would have been completely familiar to medieval people, for whom horses were a transportation, agriculture, warfare, wealth. The stable door stands partially open, and from within comes the sound of shifting hooves, the huff of a horse breathing, the creak of wood as some large body leans against a stall. There's a lantern burning inside. You can see its dim glow as your eyes adjust to the darkness. You can make out the shapes of perhaps 6 or 8 horses. In the smaller forms of what might be donkeys or mules, step inside for a moment. Let your eyes adjust. Let the smell envelop you. Horse smell is complex. There's the animal itself, the particular musk of equine sweat and skin. Stronger than human, but not unpleasant. A smell that speaks of power and work. There's the smell of their breath, grassy and sweet from a diet of hay and oats. And there's their manure, an ever-present reality of keeping large herbivores enclosed. Piles of it in the corners where it's been mucked out and is waiting to be taken to the midden heap. Fresher contributions in the stalls themselves, horse manure. If you've never encountered it up close, is not as offensive as you might think. Because horses are herbivores eating mostly grasses and grains, their waste has a vegetable smell, earthy and almost sweet. Nothing like the sharp ammonia stench of carnivore or omnivore waste. When it's fresh, it's warm and steaming, releasing that grassy scent. When it's older, it dries out and loses much of its smell, becoming just part of the general atmosphere. The hay contributes its own smell-dried grass, still carrying the ghost of summer sunshine, slightly dusty. It's piled in mangers and scattered on the floor as bedding. And every time a horse shifts position or pulls out a mouthful to eat, little puffs of hay dust rise into the air. Catching the lantern light like golden snow, there are leather tack and harnesses hanging on the walls, bridles and reins, saddles and girths. The leather has been treated with oil to keep it supple, that smell anemal hide, and the vegetable oils used to condition iTads, another layer to the stable atmosphere. Some of these pieces are old, darkened with use and sweat and time, carrying the smell of every horse that's worn them, every rider who's held them. In one stall, a mare shifts and whinnies softly. She's pregnant. You realize her sides are distended, and she has that particular careful way of moving. The smell around her is slightly different, something hormonal and biological. The smell of a body preparing for birth. A stable boy appears from the shadows. He's been sleeping in the hay, you realize, and you've woken him. He's young, maybe 10 years old, and his entire existence smells of this place. Horse and hay and leather and manure. Layered over the base scent of a child who sleeps in his clothes and bathes perhaps once a month. He's not alarmed by your presence. Visitors often come to check on their horses, and he settles back into his nest of hay with the ease of someone who's completely comfortable here, for whom this smell is home. Outside again, in the courtyard. Other smells compete for attention. There's a well in the center of the yard, its stones damp and covered in moss. The smell of water and wet stone rises from it, clean and mineral, a reminder of what lies beneath all human activity, the aquifer. The ancient water slowly filtering through layers of rock, emerging here to sustain life. The smell of the midden heap drifts from somewhere. Beyond the fence, this is where all the inn's organic waste goes. Kitchen scraps, ashes from the fires, human waste from the chamber pots, stable sweepings, everything. It's decomposing there in a slow heap, breaking down, returning to earth. The smell is not as bad as you'd think. It's been there long enough that the most aggressive decomposition has already happened. And what remains is an earthy, composty smell. Unpleasant if you focus on it, but just part of the background. If you don't, there are chickens roosting somewhere nearby. You can hear their sleepy clucks and the rustling of feathers. In the daylight, they'd be pecking around the yard, eating insects and scraps, providing eggs and eventually meat. Now they sleep, but their smell remains a combination of bird musk, the grain they eat, and the particular ammonia tang of chicken droppings. A cat slinks past, on its eternal hunt for the mice that are attracted to any place that stores grain. Its eyes reflect green in the darkness for a moment before it disappears into shadow. Cats were valuable in medieval establishments, and this one clearly has a job to do. It smells barely at all. Cats are fastidious cleaners, just a faint, its musky trace as it passes. The night air itself has a smell here, different from the countryside you walked through earlier. This is town air, carrying traces of all human activity, wood smoke from hundreds of hearth fires. The complexity of many bodies, living close together, cooking and working and living. But it's also carrying the scent of earth and growing things from the gardens behind houses. The river that probably runs somewhere nearby. The forests that still press close around the edges of settlement. The stars are visible overhead, brilliant in a way they never are in the modern world with its light pollution. The moon is rising, half full, casting silver light that makes familiar shapes strange. An owl calls from somewhere, hunting. The night is alive with predators and prey, with the ancient rhythms of nature that continue regardless of human concerns. You stand in this courtyard, halfway between the human warmth of the inn and the wider darkness beyond, and the smells around you are the smells of the border between civilization and wilderness, between the controlled and the wild, between the known and the unknown. Take a deep breath. Hold it. Let it out slowly. You are here in this moment, in this place. The smells anchor you in reality and physical presence, in the undeniable fact of a body that breathes and processes air and extracts information from every inhalation. And now, tired from your journey, full of food and ale, warm from the fire but cooling in the night air, it's time to go upstairs. Time to find your bed. Such as it is, time to rest. The stairs are narrow and steep, more like a ladder than a proper staircase by modern standards. Each step groans under your weight, oak boards worn smooth by countless feet, darkened by smoke and time. The walls on either side are close enough to touch, and they smell of the same lime plaster and smoke as downstairs, but older, deeper, as if the very structure of the building has absorbed centuries of human presence. At the top, A narrow hallway runs the length of the building, with doors on either side. Some are closed, with the sound of snoring or quiet conversation seeping through the cracks. Some stand open, revealing darkness within. The serving woman leads you to one of these open rooms, space perhaps 8 feet by 10, with a single small window shuttered against the night. She sets her candle on a small shelf. The flame flickers and sends shadows dancing across the walls, making the room seem to shift and breathe. "Bed's there," she says, gesturing to a wooden frame against one wall. "Pots under it. Anything else you come down and ask?" And then she's gone, taking the light with her, leaving you with only the faint glow of moonlight through the cracks in the shutters and the ambient light that filters up from the common room below. Give your eyes a moment to adjust. Let the shapes resolve into comprehensibility. The bed is a simple wooden frame, rope strung to support a mattress. The mattress, you can see it now, a dark mound-is thick fabric stuffed with straw. When you sit on it experimentally, it crackles and shifts, and a smell rises that is both familiar and strange. Straw, dried grass. Old now, compressed by previous sleepers, broken down into smaller and smaller pieces. It smells dusty and slightly musty, with that vegetable scent of plant matter slowly decomposing. But it's not unpleasant. It's an organic smell, a smell of the earth, a smell that humans have been sleeping on for thousands of years. There's also the smell of the fabric, self-coarse woven linen or hemp, never washed or laundered because such things are labor-intensive and water is precious. It smells of all the bodies that have lain on it, of sweat and skin oils, of the smoke that permeates everything in this building. There might be bugs in it, almost certainly there are, fleas at minimum, possibly bed bugs, but this is so normal, so expected, that it's barely worth thinking about. Everyone has bugs. Everyone wakes up with bites. It's just part of life. A thin blanket lies folded at the foot of the bed. When you shake it out, dust motes rise and dance in the moonlight. The blanket smells of wool and lanolin, of the sheep it came from, of the smoke that has cured it. It's scratchy and rough, but it will provide warmth. That's all that matters. The room itself has a smell, distinct from the bed. Old wood, the beams overhead, the floorboards underfoot, all of it centuries old. Smoke cured and dried, slowly releasing the smell of oak over decades. There's a mustiness too. The inevitable result of a building with poor ventilation, where dampness seeps in during rain and never fully dries out. In the corners, you can smell mildew. It's that particular fungal smell of moisture and organic material and time. Under the bed, as promised, there's a chamber pot ceramic with a lid. You can smell it, even with the lid on, the sour ammonia temps of urine, the earthier smell of feces. It hasn't been cleaned recently, probably just emptied and put back. Because what would you clean it with? Water is for drinking and cooking, not washing pots that will just be used for waste again. You'll add to it during the night if needed. And in the morning, someone will take it too empty on the midden heap. There's a small shelf with a basin and a jug of water. The water smells slightly of the wooden bucket it was drawn from. And when you pour a little to wash your hands and face, it's cold enough to make you gasp. The basin has no soap, is a luxury, expensive and rare. You wash with water alone, scrubbing at the dirt of the road, and the water quickly turns gray with the dust and sweat you're removing. Your clothes smell strongly now that you're in a confined space, wool and leather and sweat, wood smoke and road dust, horse from when you walk through the stables, ale from when you spilled a bit on your sleeve. You consider removing them to sleep, but the room is cold despite the warmth rising from below, and you decide to sleep clothed, as most people do, using your cloak as an extra blanket as you arrange yourself on the bed. The straw crackles and shifts, finding a new configuration under your weight. The smell intensifies for a moment, all that broken plant material releasing its scent and then settles into a background presence. Through the floorboards, you can hear the continued sounds of the common room. Voices, laughter, the scrape of benches. The smells drift up to wood smoke most strongly, but also ale and bodies and cooking. The building is porous, sound and smell moving freely through it. reminding you that you're never truly alone here, never truly private. The inn is a collective space. We're just one temporary cell in its larger organism. The window shutter has a crack in it, and a draft comes through, carrying the night air from outside. It smells of cold and earth, of the stables and the distant forest, of wood smoke from other buildings. It's fresh compared to the interior air, and you find yourself breathing it deeply, grateful for its cleanness. As your body relaxes and begins the transition towards sleep, your sense of smell becomes more acute in some ways, less in others. The strongest smells the straw, the must, the smoke fade into background, becoming just the smell of the room. But subtle things become more noticeable. There's lavender somewhere. You realize there are dried stalks of it tucked into the corners of the room. Hung from nails, meant to freshen the air and deter insects, the smell is faint but distinct, a welcome sweetness in the earthier atmosphere. There are herbs woven into the straw of the mattress too. You realize you can smell chamomile and perhaps meadowsweet, their scents released by your weight compressing the straw. These were added deliberately, for their pleasant smell and for their supposed properties of encouraging rest and deterring pests. Somewhere in the building, perhaps in the room next door, someone is coughing a deep, wet cough that speaks of chest ailments, of smoke-damaged lungs, of the respiratory diseases that are common in an age without antibiotics. You can almost smell the sickness through the walls, that slightly sweet, corrupted smell that accompanies illness, but you're not ill. You're just tired. Your body is heavy on the straw mattress. Your mind is foggy with ale and warmth and the bone-deep weariness of a day spent walking. The smells of the room, which seem so strong and strange at first, are becoming familiar, becoming just the background against which sleep happens. Your breathing deepens, slows. Your consciousness begins to fragment. Thoughts becoming dreamlike, logic dissolving. The smell of lavender, the smell of straw, the smell of smoke, eternal smoke, the smell of human civilization itself. Your last conscious thought is how strange it is that smell, of all senses, is the one most directly connected to memory and emotion, the one that bypasses the thinking brain and speaks directly to the limbic system, to the ancient parts of ourselves that remember everything, that carry the accumulated experience of all our ancestors who smelled these same smells, who slept in rooms like this, who lived and died in a world where scent was primary reality, and then you're asleep. And the smells continue without you, filling the room, filling the night, filling the endless stream of time that carries everything forward, always forward, into the uncertain future. The night is not silent, even in sleep, or in that liminal space between waking and dreaming. Sounds and smells continue to filter into consciousness, weaving themselves into the narrative of rest. Through the thin walls, voices murmur. In the room to your left, a couple is speaking in low tones. You can't make out words, but the cadence sounds like an old argument, familiar and circular. The kind that married people have, about practical matters, about money and children and tomorrow's work. Their voices rise and fall, sometimes sharp, sometimes softening into resignation. The smell of their presence seeps through the cracks in the wall battens and breath. The sour smell of a chamber pot being used, the rustling of their straw mattress as someone shifts position. To your right, someone is snoring with a rhythm that suggests deep, exhausted sleep. Between the snores, you can hear the sound of scratching fingernails on skin, the eternal battle against the bugs that share all sleeping spaces in this era. The scratch, scratch, scratch is almost rhythmic, counterpoint to the snoring from below. The common room continues its evening. The sounds are more muted. Now most people have gone to their beds or to sleeping spaces on benches near the fire, but there are still voices, still the clink of wooden cups, still the occasional laugh. The smells drift up strongly. Wood smoke. Always wood smoke, and the yeasty smell of spilled ale. And something new, someone has lit a pipe. And the sweet aromatic smell of tobacco smoke mingles with the wood smoke, creating a complex haze. Outside, the sounds of the town settling. A dog barks in the distance. Somewhere a baby cries, the sound thin and desperate in the cold night air. and then is presumably soothed because the crying stops. The wind picks up for a moment, and you hear the sign of the inn creaking on its bracket, the shutters rattling slightly, the thatch sighing and settling, and beneath all the human sounds, the non-human world continues. Mice in the walls, their tiny claws scratching as they navigate the spaces between wood and plaster, looking for grain or crumbs or nesting material. An owl's hunting cry, surprisingly close, probably perched on the roof of the inn or a nearby building. The rustle of bats, invisible in the darkness, feeding on the insects that are feeding on human habitation, your mind. In that strange state between sleep and waking, weaves these sounds into narratives. The couple arguing becomes characters in a dream you're watching them from a doorway. But their faces keep changing, becoming faces from your own life, from your own memories. The argument is about something important, something crucial, but you can never quite understand what it is. The words slip away even as you hear them. The snoring person becomes a sleeping dragon in your dream mind, guarding a hoard of what? Not gold, but something more domestic. Bread, perhaps. Warmth. Safety. The scratching becomes the sound of the dragon's scales shifting. Or perhaps mice trying to steal from the hoard. The smells weave through your dreams too, becoming more vivid, more symbolic. The wood smoke becomes the smoke of cooking fires from your childhood. Or perhaps from a childhood you never had. From the collective memory of humanity spending tens of thousands of years huddled around fires, the smoke being the price of warmth and cooked food and safety from predators. The smell triggers deep, old-feeling safety and danger mixed together, because smoke means fire, and fire is both friend and enemy, protector and destroyer. The smell of straw and herbs in your mattress becomes the smell of fields in summer, of lying in long grass under blue sky, of a peace and connection to earth that feels more like memory than imagination. Chamomile and lavender blend together into a scent that feels like it should mean something. Like it's trying to tell you something important, but the message stays just out of reach. Dissolved in dream logic. Someone is walking in the hallway outside your room. The floorboards creak under their weight. A pause, as if they're considering which door to enter. The smell of them drifts under your doormail, working class, the sharp scent of someone who's been drinking hard. For a moment, in your half-sleeping state, you tense. Some ancient alarm system, noting the presence of a stranger, assessing the level of threat. But then the footsteps move on, a door opens and closes, and the tension drains away. From the stables comes the sound of a horse whining the pregnant mare. Perhaps uncomfortable in the night, the stable boy calls out something, his voice young and sleepy. The horse settles. The night continues. In the common room, someone is singing now a ballad. The words indistinct, but the melody clear. Rising and falling with the particular sadness that drinking songs often carry, even when they're meant to be cheerful. The voice is untrained, but not unpleasant, and it carries up through the floorboards. Through your floor, into your dreams, where it becomes a song your mother sang. Or perhaps a song you heard once years ago, forgot until this moment. The smell of the singer's ale breath seems to drift up with the song. Sour and yeasty, and in your dream, it becomes the smell of fermentation, of things changing state, the transformation that is always happening at the boundary between order and decay. Time passes strangely in this state. Hours might pass, or only minutes. The boundary between sleeping and waking blurs until you're not sure which state you're in. Are you dreaming that you're in a medieval inn? Or are you really here, and the modern world is the dream? The philosophical question, what is smell really? But chemicals in air. Molecules that happen to fit receptors in your nose. Triggering electrical signals that your brain interprets as wood smoke, or straw, or ale. But the experience of smell feels so much more real than that explanation. It feels like you're touching the thing itself. Like you're directly experiencing the world rather than receiving data about it. And in memory. Which is where you spend much of the night when you're not quite sleeping. Smells are more vivid than images. You can remember the smell of your grandmother's kitchen more clearly than you can remember her face. You can remember the smell of your first school more vividly than its layout. Smell is the sense that anchors us in time, that pulls us backward and forward. That connects us to ourselves and to everyone who has ever breathed the same sense. This medieval, with all its complex smells, this is real in a way that facts and dates can never be. This is what it actually felt like to be alive in this time, to breathe this air. To exist in a body that processed these particular molecules and created these particular experiences, gradually, imperceptibly, the quality of the darkness changes. It's still night, but it's the last part of night, the part that knows dawn is coming, even if dawn is still hours away. The sounds change to fewer voices from below, more silence, more breathing, more sleep. The fire in the common room must have been banked, because the smell of smoke subtly shifts, becoming less urgent. More like the smell of coals holding heat rather than flames consuming wood. Your own breathing has deepened and steadied. Whatever dreams you were having have faded, leaving only the vague impression of having traveled somewhere, having experienced something significant, though you can't remember what. The straw beneath you has compressed and conformed to your body. The smells of the room have become so familiar that you barely notice them anymore. They're just the smell of night, of shelter, of rest, outside. A rooster crows the first one, too early. Confused about the time, or just eager to announce itself? Other roosters will answer soon, and then the dawn will come with its own smells and sounds and experiences. But for now, this last stretch of night, you rest. Your body repairs itself, your mind sorts and files the day's experiences. And the smells of the medieval world wrap around you like a blanket, holding you in this moment, in this place. In this strange and vivid reality, sleep. The dawn will come soon enough. There is a moment in the deepest part of night, when the mind becomes philosophical, even in sleep, when dreams take on the quality of meditation, and the unconscious mind processes not just the day's experiences, but larger questions. Deeper truths. If you could think clearly right now, floating in this liminal space, you might wonder, what did smell mean in the medieval world? Not just what things smelled like, but what the very experience of scent represented to people who lived in such a different relationship with their senses. The medieval understanding of smell was bound up with theories of health and disease that seemed strange to modern minds, but had their own internal logic. Miasma theory, the belief that diseases were carried by bad air, by corrupt smells, dominated medical thinking. Malaria, bad air, gave its name to malaria. The plague was thought to spread through poisonous vapors. People carried sweet-smelling herbs and spices, not just because they were pleasant, but because they believed these good smells could literally push back the bad airs, could purify the space around you, and protect you from illness. This wasn't entirely wrong in a way. While disease isn't carried by smell itself, the things that smell but rotting waste. Stagnant water, unwashed bodies often, do harbor pathogens. The correlation between bad smells and disease was real, even if the causation was misunderstood. So the medieval obsession with countering bad smells with good ones was a form of public health intervention. However imperfect, the wealthy who could afford it surrounded themselves with perfumes and spices, with pomanders and scented waters. Gloves were perfumed with rose oil and musk. Rooms were strewn with fresh herbs. Not just for luxury, though it was that too. For protection, for creating a bubble of good air in a world of bad. The church understood the power of scent as well. Incense was more than ceremonial, it was metaphysical. The smoke rising was prayers made visible, carrying human words and thoughts upward to heaven. But incense also sanctified spaces, made them holy by replacing everyday smells with the exotic fragrances of frankincense and myrrh. Substances that came from distant lands and carried the mystique of the biblical. When you entered a cathedral the few times in your life, you might do so. If you were a common person, the smell alone would tell you that this was a different space, set apart. The incense, the beeswax candles, not tallow, which was to base for such a holy place. The oil used to anoint the specific herbs scattered. On feast days, all of these created an olfactory environment that reinforced the visual and architectural messages. You are in the presence of something greater than the everyday world. Smell was also intimately connected to memory and emotion. in ways that medieval people understood even without modern neuroscience to explain it. The scent of roses might make you think of a lost love. The smell of a particular herb might bring back childhood memories so vivid they felt like time travel. Soldiers returning from war often spoke of how certain smells, the smell of their mother's cooking, the smell of the fields they'd worked, could make them weep with homesickness. Poets and writers used scent metaphorically. A virtuous person was said to have the odor of sanctity. Saints' bodies reportedly smelled sweet even after death, like flowers or spices, while sinners' bodies reeked. Whether this was literally true or poetic truth didn't much matter. The metaphor worked because everyone understood that smell communicated essence, that you could judge the nature of a thing by its scent. In the doctrine of signatures, the belief that God had marked all useful things with signs of their purpose. Smell played a crucial role. A plant that smelled refreshing might be used to treat lethargy. One that smelled sharp and clear might treat confusion of mind. One that smelled of the earth might treat ailments of the earthly body. The logic was circular but comforting. The world made sense through its smells. God had encoded meaning into scent itself. There was also an erotic dimension to medieval understanding of smell, though it was rarely discussed openly. The smell of a lover's body was intoxicating, was magic, was a form of bondage. Love potions often involve something to be worn or burned or ingested that would make you irresistible. The smell of a person's sweat was thought to carry their essence. And there are records of people treasuring clothing or handkerchiefs that carried a beloved scent, wearing them close to their skin or sleeping with them to feel closer to an absent lover. Animals were thought to be governed by smell more than humans. They tracked prey by scent, recognized their young by smell, reacted with fear or aggression to unfamiliar smells. But humans were not so different, really. A baby knew its mother by smell before it could see clearly. A traveler could smell home from miles away as the wind carried familiar scents. Enemies could sometimes be smelled. Fear has a scent. And so does violence. So does death approaching. In this medieval inn where you lie sleeping, all of these understandings of smell swirl in the smoky air. The smells here are democratic. Everyone breathes the same air, rich and poor, virtuous and corrupt. But they're also hierarchical. The smell of the merchant's spices marks him as different from the fishmonger. The smell of the innkeeper's wife who uses rose water when she can afford it marks her as different from the serving girl. The smells are on a stew. Cannot disguise yourself completely through scent. Cannot hide what you've been doing or where you've been or who you really are. Your smell is your signature, your story written in molecules that others can read, whether you want them to or not. And the smells are communal. In a world of shared spaces and shared sleeping and shared lives, you breathe in the smells of others constantly, just as they breathe in yours. You are always inhaling particles that were just exhaled by someone else, always exchanging the most intimate parts of yourself through this invisible medium of air. In your sleep, in your dreams, these philosophical truths about scent sink deeper into consciousness. You understand in a way that goes beyond words that to smell something is to take it into your body, to make it temporarily part of yourself. The wood smoke you're breathing has become part of your lungs, your blood. The herbs in your mattress are releasing molecules that are being absorbed through your skin, entering your bloodstream, subtly affecting your chemistry. You are not separate from this world you're smelling. You are deeply, physically, chemically entangled with it. Every breath is an exchange, a transaction, a blending of boundaries. This is what medieval people understood that modern people have partially forgotten. Scent is not just information about the world, it's a form of communion with it. To smell is to participate, to be bound up in the great cycle of matter and energy that connects all living things. The dawn is closer now. The quality of darkness is changing. The philosophical moment passes, dissolving back into simple sleep, into the restoration of tired body, into dreams that have no words. But something remains, a deeper knowing. A felt understanding of what it means to be alive in a body that smells and is smelled. That exists in constant exchange with everything around it. This is the gift of traveling backward in time through scent, not just knowledge, but experience. Not just facts, but truth. The first bird sings in darkness. It's a single note. Questioning, as if asking whether it's time yet, whether the night has lasted long enough. There's a pause, silence holds its breath, and then another bird answers from a different direction. And then another. And within minutes, the darkness is full of birdsong. That ancient pre-dawn chorus that has announced every morning since birds learned to fly. You're not quite awake yet. But you're not deeply asleep either. You're in that gentle space where consciousness seeps back slowly, where the world reveals itself gradually rather than all at once. The smells shift with the approaching dawn. The fire in the common room below has burned down to almost nothing. Just a heart of coals and a bed of ash. The smell of active wood smoke has faded, placed by the gentler smell of charred wood and fine ash, slightly acrid, slightly dusty. Someone will stir it back to life soon, add kindling and fresh logs, bring back the warmth. But for now, there's this moment of coolness. Of the fire sleeping as humans sleep, the smell of morning dew begins to filter through the cracks in the shutters. You can smell it even before you could see it. That fresh green scent of water condensing on grass and leaves, of earth releasing night vapors. Of the world beginning to exhale after holding its breath through darkness. It's a clean smell, restorative, carrying a promise that the day will be different from the night. That light will return, that life continues. From the kitchen, a new smell. Someone is baking the morning bread. You can smell yeast and flour. The warm wheat scent of dough that's been rising through the night and is now being shaped and slid into the oven. The smell triggers something primal. Your stomach clenches with hunger. Your mouth waters. Bread smell is one of humanity's oldest alarm clocks, announcing that the day has begun, that there will be food. That survival continues for another cycle. There are footsteps in the hallway, soft. Trying not to wake anyone, but the old floorboards betray every step with their creaks and groans. Someone else is up, perhaps heading down to the common room, perhaps to the privy in the yard. You hear a door open and close, hear the sound of someone descending the stairs. The smell of chamber pots is stronger now during the night. Most of the rooms have been used, and the smell of ammonia has built up, seeping through door cracks, mingling with the other morning smells. It's unpleasant, but expected, just part of the morning routine. Soon, the chamber pots will be carried down and emptied, but for now, they sit in their corners, adding their sharp note to the morning's olfactory. Symphony, your own body smells different now than it did when you lay down to sleep. The wool of your clothing has absorbed your night sweat. It's been pressed against your skin for hours and has taken on your personal scent more strongly. Your breath is stale, you can smell it yourself when you yawn. Your hair smells of smoke and the straw pillow, but none of this is shameful or even particularly notable. Everyone smells like this in the morning. Everyone will go about their day carrying these smells, and only at night, perhaps, will there be a chance to rinse face and hands, to air out clothing slightly before the cycle begins again. You open your eyes. The room is still dark, but there's a quality to the darkness now that wasn't there before. Suggestion of light. A thinning of the absolute black. Through the cracks in the shutters, you can see faint gray lines. The first whisper of dawn. The inn is waking around you. More footsteps in the hallway. Voices from below, quiet but distinct. The sounds of the kitchen growing louder. Pots clanging. The scrape of implements. Someone coughing. From the stables, a horse whinnies, probably hungry, wanting its morning feed. A rooster crows again, confident now, announcing proprietorship of the dawn. You sit up. The straw mattress crackles and releases a cloud of its dry vegetable smell. Your back aches, slightly straw. Beds are not kind to bodies used to modern mattresses, but the ache is not unpleasant. It's the ache of having rested, of having been still, of a body ready to move again. The air in the room is cold. Your breath makes small clouds, but you can hear the fire being built up downstairs. And soon warmth will spread through the building. You reach for your boots, which you set carefully by the bed last night. They're still damp from yesterday's walk, and they smell strongly of leather and the road of mud and miles. You pull them on anyway, lacing them with fingers that are stiff from cold. Standing, Stretch, hearing joints pop and creak. You move to the window and unlatch the shutter, pushing it open just slightly. Cold air rushes in, fresh and shocking after the closeness of the room. With it comes the full smell of morning. Wood smoke from chimneys, the earth smell of the yard, hay from the stable, bread from the kitchen. And underneath it all, the vast green smell of the countryside waking, of forests and fields and the river, of a world much larger than this small town, this small room. The sky is lightning, not quite sunrise, but close. The world is gray and silver, caught between night and day, between dream and waking. You take a deep breath of that cold morning air, feeling it clear your lungs, sharpen your mind. The night has passed. You've survived it, rested, been sheltered, and fed. Now the day awaits with its own challenges, its own journey. But first, breakfast. You can smell it calling from below. The morning is well begun now in the medieval world. But for you, the traveler through time, it's time to return. You've spent a night in this inn, you've breathed its air, eaten its food, slept in its beds, absorbed its smells into your body and memory. You've experienced as much as imagination and language can accomplish. What it was really like to exist in that time, in that place, surrounded by smells that modern people never encounter. Come back now. Slowly, gently, let the medieval inn begin to fade around you, becoming transparent, becoming memory, becoming story again instead of lived reality. The rough walls dissolve. The smoke thins and disappears. The sounds of horses and roosters and waking people drift away like fog burning off in sunlight. But the smells linger longest, as they always do. Memory is encoded in scent more deeply than in any other sense. Even as the visual details fade, you can still smell the wood smoke, can't you? Can still recall the complex aroma of the common room, the earthiness of the stable, the herbal sweetness of the sleeping chamber. These smells have been stored now in your brain, filed away in the deep archives where olfactory memories live. Years from now, you might encounter something wood smoke from a campfire. The smell of old hay, the scent of herbs drying in for just a moment. You'll be back in that medieval inn, as vividly as if you never left. This is the power and the mystery of smell. It's a time machine more effective than any narrative, more immediate than any description. A scent can transport you instantly across years or centuries, can make the past present, can dissolve the boundaries between then and now. You've learned something tonight in this journey through scent. You've learned that history is not just events and dates and famous people, but the lived experience of ordinary bodies in ordinary spaces, breathing ordinary air that happened to be remarkably different from the air we breathe now. You've learned that before modern chemistry and hygiene, before air conditioning and air fresheners, before the sanitized odorlessness of modern life. Humans existed in a rich olfactory environment where every breath carried information, where smell was language, where scent connected you to your community and your world in ways we've partially lost. You've learned that the past was not romantic or pristine or simple. It was smoky and pungent and complex, filled with the honest smells of life, lived close to earth and fire and animals and other humans. It was both harsher and more intimate than our modern existence. More uncomfortable, but also more real in certain ways, less filtered, less sanitized, less separate. And perhaps you've learned something about yourself too, about how your own body exists in space, how you're constantly exchanging molecules with the world around you, how every breath is both a taking in and a giving out, how you're never truly separate from your environment but always entangled with it through this invisible medium of air, scent. The medieval inn has taught its lessons. Now, it releases you, gently, back to your own time. You're lying in your own bed. Now, however different it is from a straw mattress, however much more comfortable, you're breathing your own familiar air, with its own particular smells of home. Whether that's fresh laundry detergent or coffee, or just the neutral nothing smell of climate-controlled modern space, your body is here. Safe, rested, ready for sleep or waking, depending on what you need. The journey through time has not tired you, but settled you, has given your mind something to process, has filled your consciousness with images and smells and experiences that crowd out anxiety and worry and the circular thoughts that sometimes prevent rest. Let yourself drift now. Let the boundary between waking and sleeping blur. Let the smells of the medieval inn become dream smells. And let the dream smells fade into the blissful nothing of deep sleep. You've traveled backward, through 7 centuries tonight, powered only by imagination and language, and the mysterious connection between scent and memory. You've walked medieval roads, entered medieval buildings, breathed medieval air. You've communed with the past in the most intimate way possible by experiencing, as closely as we can across such a distance of time, what it felt like in a body, and now that journey is complete. The story has been told. The smells have been cataloged and experienced and stored in memory. Sleep now. Rest deeply. Your breathing slows and steadens. The modern world holds you gently as the medieval inn held its travelers. As shelter has always held the weary, darkness has always cradled those who need to rest before tomorrow's journey. The past is always with us. Coded in our genes, living in our cultural memories, accessible through imagination. But it's also blessedly past, finished, requiring nothing from us now, except perhaps gratitude that we were born into this time with its comforts and its challenges, with its own particular smells and experiences. Sleep, dream, rest. The dawn will come in your own century. Bring in your own particular morning with its own smells and sounds and experiences. But tonight, you visited another time, and that visit has enriched you, has given you a gift of perspective, has connected you to the long chain of human experience stretching back through centuries. Breathe slowly. Feel your body relaxing. Notice how good it feels to simply rest, to have no demands on your consciousness, to drift in the gentle space between thoughts. The medieval inn stands eternal now in your memory, a place you can return to whenever you need to. Whenever you want to remember what it was like, what it smelled like, what it felt like to be human in a different age. But for now, let it fade. Let everything fade except the gentle rhythm of your breathing, the soft darkness of restful sleep, the peace of a journey completed, and a story well told. Good night. Sleep well. Dream of wood smoke and bread, of horses and herbs, of all the rich sensory complexity of life, lived fully in any era. The story ends here, but the memory lingers as smell always lingers, gentle and persistent and true. This section is designed to be read in a whisper, or to accompany pure ambient sound. The words are sparse, leaving space for silence and imagination. The fire has burned to embers, soft red glow in the darkness. The crack and pop of coals settling. A timber beam creaks, ancient wood breathing with the temperature changes of night. The building itself seems to sigh. Outside, in the stable, a horse shifts its weight. The gentle sound of large body on straw, a huff of breath, settling back into sleep. The wind, so gentle now, moves through the thatch above, a whisper of straw against straw, the quietest rustle. A dog's paws twitch in sleep chasing, dream rabbits perhaps, through dream fields. A small whine, soft as moth wings. Then silence again. Someone breathing in the next room, slow, deep, the rhythm of complete. Rest, in and out, in and out. As humans have breathed for 10,000 years of sleeping, from far away, a single bell tolls. The monastery bell, perhaps. Marking some hour of monastic prayer, the sound comes across the dark town. Across the fields, across the centuries, one note, clear, then fading into silence. In the kitchen, banked ashes shift as a coal breaks apart. The softest sound, like sand falling. The smell of old smoke, quiet now, patient, waiting for morning's kindling. Leather creaks as a saddle settles on its rack. Wood and metal and animal hide, all contracting slightly in the cooling night. The sound of materials at rest. A mouse brave in the darkness crosses the floor on invisible feet. The tiniest scratch of claws on stone, then nothing frozen. Listening, then movement again, continuing its small, necessary journey. The rushes on the floor rustle as someone far below shifts in sleep near the dying fire. A murmur words from a dream. It's impossible to distinguish. Then quiet breathing resumed. The world grows stiller, the absolute deep of night, when even the night creatures rest. When time itself seems to pause between the breath out and the breath in. A rooster clears its throat, not quite crowing, not yet. Just a small sound announcing that it's still there. Still guardian of the dawn? Silence acknowledges the announcement. The rooster sleeps again. And underneath everything, under the sounds and the silence, the smells persist. Wood smoke, eternal, the smell of human civilization itself. Hay and horse and leather, the partnership of human and animal. Bread's ghost, flour and yeast and promise. Earth and stone, the minerals that hold everything. Wool and skin and breath, the honest smell of bodies at rest. Herbs faint and faithful, lavender keeping its watch against the dark. These smells ask nothing. They simply are present, patient, real. Your breathing has synchronized with the breathing of the inn, with the breathing of all the sleepers, with the breathing of the night itself, in and out, slow, slower, each breath releasing you deeper into rest. The darkness is complete now. No light, no image, only sound and smell and the soft weight of night. Safe here, held here, present here, in this moment that stretches backward through time and forward into dreams. A single bird, the first, the earliest, the one who always knows, begins a tentative song. Questioning the darkness, is it time? Not yet, the darkness answers. Not yet, soon but not yet. Rest, sleep, dream of nothing, or dream of everything. Or simply rest in that place beyond dreaming where consciousness dissolves and restores itself. The medieval inn holds its breath with you. The smoke rises invisible in darkness. The embers glow there. Secret red, the timbers creak their quiet song of age and strength and shelter. And you are here, and you are home in your own time, and you are everywhere and nowhere. Dissolved in rest, held in the gentle arms of sleep, breathe. Rest, sleep. In the distance, so faint you can barely hear it, the monastery bell marks another hour. The sound comes like a blessing across the dark fields, across the sleeping town, across the gulf of centuries, reaching forward to remind us that all times are one in the eternal present of consciousness, and that every human who has ever lived has done these same things, sought shelter, breathed air, smelled smoke, and surrendered finally to sleep's kind darkness. The story ends not with words, but with silence, with the continuation of breathing, with the endless cycle of days and nights, with the mystery of consciousness and rest, with the gift of having traveled backward through time and forward into dreams, all while remaining safe in the present moment, held and sheltered and at peace. Sleep now. The medieval world fades to nothing. Only rest remains. Only breath. Only peace.